Hello again, Math 10 students. In this video, I'm going to take a look at Hawks Section 6.4. This is a continuation of the last video I did where we looked at Section 6.3. There was a lot of demand for doing a video going over some of the questions in these two sections. The last one ran a little bit long. It was about 14 minutes, so I want to make sure that I split these up so that they're manageable, so that you're not taking a half hour to watch one video. Though I'm sure spending a half hour on Friday night watching math videos sounds like good times to me, it might not be everyone's cup of tea. So I will try to make sure that these videos are a little bit shorter so that you can digest them in smaller chunks. So let's take a look at some of the questions in this section. They will typically ask you to find the equation of a line. Section 6.4, 6.4a technically, you're typically asked to find the equation. Now I do have a video on just that topic, finding the equation, and I strongly encourage you to check that one out before watching this one. I'm going to assume that you've seen that, or at least have a rudimentary idea of how you go about that process when I'm doing this, and I'm going to take a look at a couple of these stranger questions in this section. So first of all, just a brief review. How does this work? You'll be given some information and you have to put it into that y equals mx plus b formula. You have to write your final answer in that formula. Y equals some number times x and then plus some number at the very end. So we'll just do a very quick example here. My first step, and again watch that other video for a good step-by-step breakdown of this, is to write out the y equals mx plus b. They gave me a slope, so I can put that in. I don't have to use the slope formula to find it. And it's going to be y equals negative 1x plus b. I'm replacing my slope with my m with negative 1 because that's what they told me it is. Slope is always going to be the m. So m gets replaced with negative 1. So next up, I've got an ordered pair, 3 and 4, negative 3 and negative 4 rather. So negative 3, negative 4 is my ordered pair. And I chose this particular question to start out with because there are a ton of negative numbers in here, and really you always have to be careful with those. The negative numbers cause more mistakes than just about anything else. So let's go ahead and replace our y and our x with negative 4 and negative 3. Oops, not the b, the x. So be careful, make sure that you label this. It's always x first and then y. So I'm actually starting with the y is a negative 4. And I'm going to go ahead and write that in. So that's negative 4 equals negative 1, and then in parentheses times negative 3, and then plus b. Alright, a lot of negatives to deal with. First of all, negative 1 times negative 3, that's easy enough. That's going to be a positive 3. So I get negative 4 equals 3 plus b. So that's not so bad. And now I have to solve for b still, so I'm going to do a subtraction on each side to get rid of that positive 3. So minus 3 on both sides. That cancels. And negative 4 and a negative 3, when I combine those, same sign, so I'm going to add the values and I get a negative 7 equals b. See those negative signs? They are crazy. So that's my b. I can plug that in right here, negative 7. And my m, my slope, they already gave me is negative 1. So I'll go ahead and try to type that in. Y equals negative 1x and then plus negative 7. Just how it appears here. Now there's a couple things here. If I submit the answer, I get this little blue bar of embarrassment on the bottom that says, that's right, but it's kind of tacky. Why would you do that? You've done a couple things here that are kind of bad form. It's correct, but you've done some things that you typically want to avoid, like this plus sign and minus sign back to back. That's unnecessary. You can just write minus 7. The plus sign isn't necessary there. Also, if you have a coefficient of 1, if there's a 1 in front of that x, you don't have to write it. That's just negative x. So now that I've cleaned this up a bit and written it in a stylish way, it should accept my answer. There we go. If you're doing Certify and you make one of those mistakes, don't worry. It's not technically a mistake. You're just writing things in a way that's not the slickest way to write it. So it'll just give you a little pop-up that says, that's not in simplest form. Please go back and correct one of those two things. Another thing that can come up with is if you have an intercept of 0, you don't have to write plus 0 at the end. Let's take a look at another example. This is in fact exactly the one that I wanted. Thank you, Hawks, for cooperating for once. So let's take a look at what happens here. So I'm going to do the same type of setup here. My slope is 0 and my ordered pair is -5, -5. So this is kind of a funny one. Slope of 0, if you've checked some of my previous videos, is kind of an odd thing to happen. So let's take a look at what happens here when we have a slope of 0. Alright, I don't know why it's a double 0 there. Let's just deal with it. So slope of 0, I do my y equals mx plus b. And again, I want to label my x and y on that ordered pair. So that's alphabetical order x, y. In this case, they're both the same, so it doesn't really matter. And I can replace the y with a -5 with this one right here, the m with my slope of 0, and then this x with the other -5. And so this becomes -5 equals slope is 0 times, in parentheses, -5, and then plus b. Alright, so not too bad. When I multiply it out, 0 times -5 is still 0. So -5 is equal to 0 plus b. Well, 0 plus b is just b. I don't actually have to do anything to solve this one. It's -5 equals b. And I've got my intercept. So when I fill in the blanks here, the y equals slope times x plus the intercept, it's going to look kind of like this. I'm going to put in my slope of 0. And you might already know the punchline here and might be cringing as I do this, but that's fine. And then plus my intercept of -5. As before, I don't have to write the plus minus. I can just write -5. So y equals 0x minus 5. I don't have to write the plus sign there because the 5 is negative. Now again, when I submit, it's going to give me this little blue bar of this is not in simplest form, and the reason being 0 times x is just 0, meaning my slope term totally cancels out, and it's just going to look like this, y equals -5. This is kind of a funny looking line, but this is going to be a horizontal line. It's going straight across, and every single y value on that line will be the same. It'll be 5. It's not going up or down, so the y is never changing. It's always -5. And we saw an example like that in a prior video, not from this particular context, but we saw a line with a slope of 0, and it didn't go up or down, and it had an equation that looked kind of like that. So that's something that can come up as well. The very last question from this section that I want to take a look at is this word problem, because this throws people off. People think that this is supposed to be a lot more complicated than it is, but it is literally the same type of question as all the others. This is actually very similar to the question that I did in my very first video for this particular playlist, where we looked at college tuition and did something similar to this. So we're looking at a local cinema that found that when they charged $8 for admissions, they got 2,050 people coming in that week. And when they decreased their price to $7 for admission, their attendance obviously went up. People wanted to go because it was cheaper, so that went up to 3,050 people per week. So we want to see if we can use this data to construct a mathematical model, to construct an equation. So we want to find the slope. In other words, changing the admissions price by $1, how does that impact attendance? Well, we've got two ordered pairs here. Remember, when you're dealing with these, you've got independent and dependent variables. The independent variable you think is your input, what you can change, and the dependent variable is the output, the effect of that. So the independent variable is the cost of admissions here. They can control the price of their tickets. And the dependent variable, the number of people who will go to the cinema, depends on what they cost. So that is the dependent variable. So in other words, the order that these should go in is the dollar amount goes first, and then the attendance rate goes last. So this first sentence right here could boil down to, hey, if I put an input of $8, my output is 2,050 people. The second sentence there boils down to, if I put an input of $7, the output, the y value or the dependent variable, is 30,000. Now this particular problem asks you to use letters other than x and y. I just do that at the very end. I use x and y for just about everything, and then at the very end I'll switch it to the letters they want. Why confuse things if you're used to x and y? Go ahead and use them here. So that's input and output, x and y. and we have to find the equation of this line. Now go back and check the video for section 6.4, and I go over in detail how to find the equation of a line if you're given 2 points. Essentially, you're going to start by finding the slope, so that's y minus y over x minus x. So we'll do 30,000, excuse me, let me switch that to color, and I'll just start with the 20,050 minus the, 2,050, I don't know why I keep saying 20 and 30, minus the 3,050, and then on the bottom, if I started with the 2,050, I'm going to start with 8 and then minus 7. And so that ought to give me my slope. In other words, attendance went from, if I drop the price from $8 to $7, if I subtract that, I drop the price by $1, and attendance would have changed by, the attendance would have changed by this number here. You would have, if you increase the price $1, attendance is going to go down. So 8 minus 7, that's saying if I increase the attendance by $1, the top that will, when I subtract that, I will get negative 1,000 here. That's the amount that attendance went down when if they were to increase. I forgot that I had swapped the order here. So when you subtract across, you get negative 1,000 on the top and positive 1 on the bottom. Of course, if you reduce that fraction, it's already reduced pretty much, but you can simplify it to just plain old negative 1,000. So that's telling you lose 1,000 people every time you increase the cost by $1. Second step, once I've found the slope, I'm going to put this into the y equals mx plus b formula, and I've got to pick one of these 2 points. It doesn't matter for my x and y. Go ahead and do the first one, and then I'm going to use this as my slope. So my y is 20,050 equals, my slope is negative 1,000 times x, which is 8, and then plus b. So I'm just replacing those letters with the numbers here, and again my slope is always my m. That's what's going to be m. And now I do the working out. I do my arithmetic here. Negative 1,000 times 8 is not too bad. That's negative 8,000. And so 2050 equals negative 8,000 plus b. And then at the very end, I cancel out that negative 8,000 with a plus 8,000 on both sides. So I'm going to have to add the 8,000 here and over here as well. So 2,050 plus 8,000 is going to give me 10,050 as my b. I've got my b and I've got my m, my slope and my intercept. So when I write and fill in the blanks in that equation, typically we think of it as y equals a number times x as your slope plus some other number as your intercept, and I'm going to just fill in the blanks. So my slope was negative 1,000. It'll be y equals negative 1,000 x and then plus 10,050. Now if I try to type this in here, it's going to yell at me because it wants me to use a and p instead of x and y. That's okay. It's easy enough to just change the letters at the end. So instead of y, I'm going to use a equals negative 1,000. Instead of x, I'm going to use p and then plus the 10,050. And that should be the final answer there. So a equals negative 1,000 p plus 10,050. All right, and there we go. So a little bit weird that they ask you to change the x and y to p and a. Mostly I think they just want you to realize that it doesn't matter what letters you use. The x and y are just a convention. That's what we typically use. But you can use letters that better represent the values, a for attendance, p for price, if you'd rather do it that way. But the main thing is to see from this is that you can also see the connection between this formula and what's going on here. Hey, I'm losing $1,000 for every extra dollar that I charge. So if I were to put in a price of 0, my baseline would be 10,050 people coming to see the movie. Well, that's great, but I'm not getting any money for that. So as I increase the price, every dollar increase subtracts $1,000 from that attendance. All right, hopefully this helped you a little bit with section 6.4 in Hawks. please feel free to book tutoring or come to the weekly group online tutoring sessions or on-campus tutoring sessions if you need any extra help with these.